What happens when another EU member decides to shut its doors to Muslim immigrants? How did the Netherlands' radical policies actually solve their national crisis? Welcome back to Nowhere Diary. Today we are diving into the bold and controversial moves by the Dutch government that are turning the Netherlands' immigration system upside down. Join us as we uncover how the Netherlanders are settling their immigration crisis once and for all. The Dutch and Muslims have a rather complicated history. They go way back, stretching several centuries. Their story is marked by both cooperation and conflict, which doesn't seem to make sense. But if you think about how all EU members are having issues with Muslims, it does make a lot of sense. It all began in the 16th century when the Dutch Republic, a rising power in Europe, started to engage with the Ottoman Empire, the dominant Muslim power at the time. This relationship was primarily driven by mutual economic interests and a shared adversary in the Spanish Habsburgs. In the 17th century, the Dutch secured trading privileges in the Ottoman Empire, which opened up a lucrative avenue for commerce. During this period, Ottoman merchants began settling in Dutch port cities like Amsterdam, contributing to a small but significant Muslim presence in the Netherlands. Interestingly, the Dutch, known for their religious tolerance, allowed these traders to practice their faith, making the Netherlands a melting pot of different cultures and religions. But trade wasn't the only point of contact. Dutch sailors, many of whom were captured by Barbary pirates, sometimes converted to Islam, often as a means of escaping slavery. Some even rose through the ranks to become admirals in the Ottoman Navy. These Dutch converts, known as renegades, were both a symbol of the interconnectedness of the Muslim and Dutch worlds and a source of tension back home, where their conversion was viewed with suspicion. The Dutch also had a significant Muslim population in their colonies, particularly in the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. For centuries, the Dutch ruled over this vast, predominantly Muslim region, and their interactions with the local population were a mix of exploitation, cooperation, and conflict. The Dutch colonial administration often viewed Islam with a mixture of respect and fear, recognizing its influence while also seeing it as a potential source of resistance against colonial rule. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the relationship between the Dutch and Muslims took on a new dimension. Most Dutch Muslims trace their roots back to Turkey and Morocco, but the community has grown to include people from all over the Islamic world since the end of World War II. Now, the Netherlands is home to Muslims of various backgrounds from Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan to Somalia, the Balkans, and Syria. There's even a small group of Dutch converts adding to the mix. Sunni Islam is the dominant tradition among Dutch Muslims. For instance, around 80% of Turkish Dutch Muslims identify as Sunni, with the rest belonging to smaller groups like Alawi, Shia, Salafi, or Ahmadi communities. Moroccan Dutch Muslims follow a similar pattern, with nearly 85% identifying as Sunni. Religious practices, though, vary widely across these communities. While many Dutch Muslims don't frequently attend mosque services, about 40% of Turkish Dutch and 37% of Moroccan Dutch Muslims go at least once a week. Compare that to Surinamese Dutch Muslims, where only 16% attend mosque weekly. Prayer habits also differ. 80% of Somali Dutch Muslims pray 5 times a day, but just over 20% of Surinamese Dutch Muslims do the same. When it comes to halal food, most groups stick closely to their dietary laws, with over 80% adherence across the board, except in the Surinamese Dutch community. Fasting during Ramadan shows similar variation. While nearly 90% of Moroccan Dutch Muslims fast the entire month, only 34% of Surinamese Dutch Muslims do. And when it comes to wearing veils, Somali Dutch Muslim women are the most likely to cover, with 90% doing so. Interestingly, despite ongoing debates about religious clothing in the Netherlands, the majority of Dutch people are okay with Muslim girls wearing headscarves. In fact, only a small percentage support a complete ban on religion and believe Muslim women should be free to wear at least a hijab, if not a full-face veil. Like most EU member states, the Netherlands had been really tolerant toward Muslims. But you know the saying, where there are Muslims, there's always violence. Geert Wilders has brought attention to the high crime rates among Moroccan Dutch youth. He stated that over 60% of Moroccan Dutch youth under the age of 23 have been arrested by the police, with their involvement in violent street crimes reportedly being 20 times higher than other groups. These alarming statistics have fueled heated debates about the effectiveness of integration policies and the challenges facing the Moroccan Dutch community. The problem for many Muslims in the Netherlands, particularly those of Moroccan and Turkish descent, isn't limited to just assimilation or fitting in. It also includes surviving in a society where socioeconomic hurdles are steep. Higher unemployment rates due to their lower levels of education lead to social exclusion, which in turn results in high crime rates. This vicious cycle makes it tough for Muslim communities to fully integrate. These challenges don't just affect individuals, they ripple out, influencing how communities interact with broader Dutch society and how they're perceived by others. The Netherlands' relationship with its Muslim community started to take a dark turn in 2004, with the shocking murder of filmmaker Theo van Gogh by a radicalized Dutch-Moroccan Muslim. This incident, along with the involvement of Dutch nationals in conflicts in Syria and Iraq, sparked fears of homegrown extremism. The specter of radicalization has since loomed large in Dutch society, prompting a national conversation about the risks and realities of extremism within its borders. The Dutch have long championed a multicultural model, encouraging the preservation of distinct cultural identities within a unified society. But what happens when this approach starts to show cracks? Experts assert that instead of fostering harmony, this model leads to social segregation. The result? Former pro-immigration countries have shifted gears towards stronger assimilation policies that will better support integration and social cohesion. But that's not all. Because of the rising visibility of the Muslim community in the Netherlands, marked by the continuous construction of mosques and the practice of Islamic customs in public places, backlash has become a growing concern. In some areas, this backlash has manifested in protests, social tensions, and other worse things. On May 9th, a seemingly peaceful protest in the heart of Amsterdam quickly spiraled into chaos when Dutch police moved in to break up a pro-Palestine encampment set up by students from the University of Amsterdam. This wasn't just any ordinary protest. It was part of a growing wave of demonstrations across Europe in response to the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict, which has seen a surge in violence and casualties. The students had set up the encampment a few days earlier, rallying against what they saw as an unjust occupation and the suffering of Palestinians. For a while, it seemed like the protest would pass without incident, but that changed dramatically when the police decided to intervene. As the police moved in, tensions flared. The Dutch authorities, known for their generally tolerant approach, were not messing around this time. They had orders to clear the area, and when the protesters refused to disperse, things turned ugly. Clashes between the police and protesters erupted, with reports of officers using force to break up the gathering. Protesters accused the police of heavy-handed tactics, while the police claimed they were simply enforcing the law. This standoff was a reflection of the broader and increasingly polarized atmosphere in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is now grappling with deep divisions over issues like Muslim immigration, national identity, and its role in the Israel-Hamas war. The May 9th standoff became a flashpoint for these tensions, highlighting the growing radicalized Muslim youth within Dutch society. The fallout from this incident is still unfolding months after it, with debates raging over the appropriateness of the police response and the future of public demonstrations in the Netherlands. As the country continues to navigate its Muslim-related issues, one thing is clear. The events of May 9th have left a mark on the national consciousness, raising questions about the balance between free expression and public order, in a society that is slowly but surely being divided by the need for its safety versus modern leftist ideologies that are spreading like wildfire across the Western world. With rising concerns about crime, cultural integration, and radicalization, it was time for the Dutch government to act, and it did. Though leftist liberal EU members and the mainstream media are criticizing the Dutch government for it, it all started with the rise of right-wing populism, particularly through Geert Wilders and his Party for Freedom, or PVV. Wilders, this eloquent and suave Dutchman who has never shied away from controversy, pushed for some of the strictest immigration policies in Europe. He called for closing the borders to immigrants from Islamic countries and implementing severe restrictions on those already in the country. Although he didn't become prime minister, his influence led to a significant hardening of the Netherlands' stance on immigration. The new Dutch government, a strange but exciting new coalition put together by the new Netherlands Prime Minister Dick Shaw, includes Geert Wilders' PVV. This new government has moved quickly to tighten asylum and immigration laws. They've also opted out of several EU asylum and immigration regulations, aiming to regain full control over who enters the country. This wasn't just about reducing numbers. It was about sending a clear message. The Netherlands is getting tired of its open-door approach to Muslims. In parallel, the government implemented policies aimed at addressing the integration issues that had long plagued the country. Recognizing that the multicultural model had its flaws, they began pushing for stronger assimilation policies. These included language requirements, a civic integration exam, and stricter conditions for family reunification. The goal was to ensure that immigrants didn't just live in the Netherlands, but became part of Dutch society. Security concerns were also high on the agenda. The Dutch authorities stepped up their efforts to monitor and counter radicalization, particularly among the youth. This included more surveillance of religious institutions and closer scrutiny of online activities that could lead to extremism. The government also introduced tougher penalties for those involved in radical activities, signaling a no-nonsense approach to tackling the issue. But it wasn't just about laws and regulations. Public attitudes were shifting too. The debate around religious clothing, such as the hijab and niqab, became a hot-button issue, with the government eventually introducing bans on face coverings in certain public spaces. This move, while controversial, was seen by many as a necessary step to ensure public safety and social cohesion. But to nobody's surprise, these solutions have not been without their critics. As mentioned earlier, liberal leftist EU members and the mainstream media are criticizing the Netherlands non-stop, lecturing them about balancing between security, civil liberties, and the Muslim immigrants' human rights, all while labeling their new government as far-right. But at the end of the day, the only voices that matter are those of the country's citizens, and the Dutch public supports their new government's stricter immigration and asylum policies, especially in light of rising concerns over national security and cultural integration. Many citizens feel that these stricter measures are necessary to maintain social stability and address the challenges posed by high immigration rates. To say that the Netherlands' new policies to end their Muslim immigration crisis is commendable is a gross understatement. Keep it up, Netherlanders. Someday this will all be over and everyone will be happy.